Hey, sixth grade, happy Monday. I hope that you all had a great weekend and are ready to dive into some new math this week. Before we get into new stuff though, go ahead and take a few minutes to complete your PDN. It's a review of the vocabulary that we learned on Friday, peaks, gaps, clusters, and symmetry as you're looking at this dot plot. Go ahead and complete that and then come back to the video when you're ready to review. Okay, so let's take a look at this dot plot. It says minutes to eat breakfast. I am very, very curious to know who can eat their breakfast in 0 minutes, but it is data on a dot plot, so I'm going to trust it. So let's look at these 4 questions. We have to look for peaks, gaps, clusters, and symmetry in this data set. So the first thing I'm going to look for are peaks. Remember, peaks are those highest points within a data set. If I'm looking at how this data set is spread out, there actually are quite a few peaks. So I guess that I would accept a couple of different answers. Potentially 0, 3, 5, and 10 stand out to me. But because 3 and 5 are close to like 11 and a couple others and each other, I'm going to just choose to say that there's a peak at 0 and another peak at 10, since those are the 2 highest points. Next, I need to look for some gaps. Remember, gaps is when there's an absence of data or there's a space without any data present. And I definitely see a gap in between 5 and 8 on 6 and 7. There is no data. So remember, I can write this out 2 ways. I could say between 5 and 8, or I could say 6 to 7. Either one of those would be completely correct. Okay, clusters of data. Because there's a gap right in the middle here, I definitely have 2 clusters of data. I have a cluster of data between 0 and 5, and I have another cluster between 8 and 12. So I'm going to go ahead and write that down. There's a cluster between 8 to 5, and another one from 8 to 12. Okay. Then I'm thinking about symmetry. If I drew a line right down the middle of this dot plot, do both sides of the dot plot look the same? For this one, I would say not so much. There's still a big gap on the right side, and this kind of has 3 high peaks where this goes up towards the middle and then back down. So I'm going to say no, the right side and the left side are not similar. So this does not have symmetry. Okay, let's go down to what we're learning about today. So today we're learning about something called variability. There are 2 general descriptions that we could have when we look at a data display. We could say a data display has low variability or high variability. On Friday, we looked at some data displays and used these 4 7th grade level terms to sort of describe what we saw. And we just reviewed those in the PDN as well. Peaks, the highest part of the display. Gaps, intervals that do not contain any data. Clusters, groups of data points that lie within the same intervals, so those clustered points together. And then symmetry, when one side of the graph looks almost the same as the other. There's another way we can describe these same data displays using mathematical language that takes into consideration all of these patterns that we learned about on Friday. And like I mentioned earlier, that's called variability. I'm just going to read this definition out loud. Variability measures how much your scores differ from each other in a data set. Variability also refers to the spread in a data display. Data sets with similar values have low variability, while data sets that have values that are spread out have high variability. Okay, so low variability is a data set that has a lot of similar values collected together. And the way that we can look for this visually is high peaks. That means that a lot of people had the same data. So in this histogram, a lot came in at 10, 9, and 11. That's a lot of the same data or similar data. That's going to show a high peak. What else we can look for in a data display is that it's very close together. There's a small range of data which again means that there's not a lot of variance or variability in that data. There's low variability because there are a lot of similar values. Now, high variability is the opposite. High variability is a data set that have values that are very spread out. There are a lot of different data points within a data set that has high variability. And the way that we look for that visually on a histogram or a dot plot is if there aren't really any high peaks. There's these low peaks all throughout, and it's very, very spread out across the data display. Again, there are a lot of different types of data. That means that there's a lot of variance or a lot of variability. Okay. This table right here is going to be really important for you to come back to as you practice on your own. So I want to encourage you to go back to these notes so that you get everything right, especially your exit ticket today. Let's do an example together. So here's another histogram. It says, look at the data display below, determine if it shows high variability or low variability, and explain why. Okay. So I see a histogram, and right now, again, I'm thinking about two things. Are my peaks high or low? And is my data smushed together, clustered together, or is it spread out? Well, I see two things for sure right here. I see that I have high peaks here. There's a lot of data in the center of this histogram, especially around 50 and 55. And I also see that it's very clustered together. Okay, that means that there's not a lot of variance in the data set. I'm going to go back to the notes just to check that. High peaks is what I saw, and I also saw that they were very close together. So that tells me that this has low variability. There is not a lot of variance between the different types of, or the different data points that were collected. And again, the reason that I know that, I just said that, this histogram, actually, let's turn around the question. Oh yeah, I can start that way. This histogram shows low variability because it has high peaks and is clustered very close together. This shows that there is a lot of similar data in the set. Okay, so low variability because there's high peaks and it's clustered together. Let's look at example number 2. Look at the data display below. Determine if it shows high variability or low variability and explain why. So the same exact thing, guys, just a different histogram here. Okay. So again, I'm thinking about two things. I'm thinking about what kind of peaks I see in this data, and I'm also thinking about, is this clustered close together or is it spread out across the visual? Okay, so I do see some peaks, but none of them are very drastic. They're all kind of together, kind of like I saw in this example that we first looked at during notes. Okay, so peaks, I mean, I guess that they're there a little bit, but they're kind of shorter, so I'm not all the way confident on that one. So let me ask my second question. Is this very clustered together or is it spread out? Well, especially when I consider this graph, this looks very spread out. So I'm gonna say that this one has high variability. I know that because there aren't as many drastic peaks in the data, and it's pretty spread out across the histogram. It's not clustered together and concentrated in one spot. So I'm going to type that out pretty much exactly how I said it. This histogram has high variability because there aren't high peaks and the data is very spread out across the display. Good, I feel good about that. Let's go ahead down to practice set number 1. You actually have 3 questions in practice set number 1. The first 2 are exactly what we just did together, and the third one is the same information. You got to think about it the same way, but it's a multiple choice. Go ahead and do questions 1, 2, and 3 on practice set 1, and then come back when you're ready to review. All right, team, let's go ahead and review practice set 1. Now, instead of a histogram, this is a dot plot. This is the first one that we've looked at in today's classwork. This says, look at the data display below. Determine if it shows high variability or low variability and explain why. So same directions, just different type of graph. But I'm still looking for the same things. I'm looking to see, does this have very high peaks? And is it really close together or spread out? It's definitely spread out. Goes all the way from 55 to 100, and there's a huge gap in there. So I'm gonna say this is spread out. That makes me think that it has high variability, but let me also think about peaks. There really aren't any drastic peaks. The options are either 1x, 2x's, or 3x's. Those are all pretty close together. So I think I'm pretty confident with my answer that this dot plot, has high variability. There's a lot of different types of answers. There's a lot of variance in this data set. It goes all the way from 55 to 100, okay? And again, how I know is that the data is very spread out and does not have high peaks. I'll go ahead and fix that typo real quick, and I'm good to go. Okay, now we're back to histograms. Look at the data display below. Determine if it shows high variability or low variability and explain why. Okay, so again, definitely have some super high peaks here, which means that there's a lot of the same data in this 60 grams category, okay? That makes me think there's not a lot of variability because a lot of the same data came up. Let me also think about how spread out this is. Is it clustered together or is it really spread out? I can definitely see that it's super clustered together. So this has high peaks and is clustered together. That definitely means that it has low variability. I know this has low variability because the data is clustered close together and has very high peaks. Great. Let's go look at this third question, which is a multiple choice, a little bit different than what we've been seeing. It says, which of the following is a correct way to describe the variability of the dot plot below? Okay, ages of customers. Let me look at my options and then I'm gonna go back to think about it. The dot plot has high variability because the data is very spread out. The dot plot has low variability because the data is very spread out. The dot plot has high variability because the data is clustered very close together, or the dot plot has low variability because the data is clustered very close together. Okay, so each of these answers has two parts to it. It kind of gives me like a claim and evidence statement. Ms. Harris would be so proud of me. So my claim, I have to either decide, does this have high variability or low variability? And then once I narrow that down, I have to decide what the right reasoning is. So let's first figure out if this has high variability or low variability. Well, let's see. First, when I glance at it really quickly, I do see a high peak right here, and this feels clustered together. And then I notice these dots way out here, way spread out. So even at first glance, if I thought it had low variability because of this really high peak, I actually think it has high variability because look at these different data points way up here. Okay, so I'm gonna get rid of anything that says low variability. I'm gonna go ahead and cross these out. Because the data is so spread out, it must have high variability. So now I have to figure out which one of these reasons supports my claim that it has high variability. Does it have high variability because it's very spread out, or does it have high variability because it's close together? No, if it was close together, that would be a reason for low variability. So I'm gonna go ahead and eliminate that. And I'm gonna say that A is my all the way right answer. So I'm gonna go ahead and record A down here. The dot plot has high variability. There's a lot of different data points because the data is very spread out. That's the correct answer. All right, team, go ahead and complete practice set number 2 and your exit ticket. Try your very best, and like I said, do not be afraid to rewind the video and watch how I did examples in practice set number 1, and also go back to your notes so that you know you're making the absolute right choices. See you tomorrow.